Hi everybody, it's Judith. Today I want to give you a brief introduction to beginning embroidery. When I teach a class, which we can't do right now unfortunately, but when I do teach it, this would be the beginning of the class for beginning embroidery, and then we would go into the separate stitches. So for today I'm going to give you the brief intro, and then if you go to our website and click workshops, under workshops you'll see an area for videos. And in the video, there'll be a link for, it'll probably say either embroidery stitches or beginning embroidery stitches. I haven't made the link yet, so I don't know what I'm going to call it, but it'll be obvious. Then you'll have a library of all of the separate stitches that we use in the beginning and even some of the intermediate embroidery stitches. So I think that'll be a nice way for you to be able to work through this on your own. So right now we'll just talk about supplies. You will need a hoop. That's one of the first things you need. You don't ever want to embroider unless you just absolutely can't. You don't want to embroider without a hoop because it helps to hold your fabric really taut, nice and snug, and you don't get a lot of puckering and problems like that. So you start with a hoop. They come either in wood or plastic. I prefer wood myself, but some people like the plastic ones better. I think they're a tiny bit less expensive. Mostly we sell wood on our website. They come in a lot of different sizes. You want to try to use the size that's appropriate for what you're going to be working on. So our beginning embroidery samplers, here's a finished one right here, they are made for a 6-inch hoop. So you can see that the area that you're embroidering falls inside of the hoop, okay? So that's ideal. So if you're making something bigger, you can get a 7-inch hoop, a 9-inch hoop, a 10-inch hoop. At some point they're going to get too unwieldy and be too big, and then you'll have to just sort of pop the hoop off and move it around if you're working on something really big. But I doubt you'll be doing that for a while. So anyway, hoop. Then you need fabric, either the sampler like I just showed you, which comes already stamped onto the fabric, or if you're just doing it by yourself and just sort of practicing some stitches. This piece is a little big, but you want something that's larger than your hoop by a couple of inches all the way around. Okay, and ideally your fabric would be cotton or linen. Those are the two prime pieces of kinds of fabric to use. So to get your hoop onto the fabric, it comes in two parts. There's an inner part, which is a tiny bit less in diameter, and the outer part. So you lay the inner part down on the table. Lay your fabric over. You can see I've already had a hoop in here, but doesn't really matter. And then you take the outer part of the hoop and pop it on to the inner hoop in the fabric. And if it's too tight, just unscrew this screw a little bit and until you can get it on. But then comes the little task of getting everything nice and snug. So you'll tighten your screw up a bit, and then you start the process of sort of tugging on your fabric and sort of screwing at the same time. You want to tug all the way around the fabric so that you get any puckering out. You get rid of that, okay? So you just work around, tug, tug. Make sure that your hoop is, that the top is down far enough. You don't want the bottom to be hanging, the inner hoop to be hanging out from the bottom. And you don't want the upper hoop to be falling off too much. So just make sure they're nice and snug together. Keep tugging, tighten up a little bit more. And tug. And you just work your way around until when you tap on it, sounds like a little drum. And it just, there's not a lot of play. Now, as you're in the process of embroidering, you'll find that you have to kind of keep tightening up. You'll tug on your fabric once in a while and you'll tighten the screw. But just keep it taut while you're working. Okay, so fabric, hoop, we've covered. The next thing we should probably talk about is floss. Embroidery floss comes in a lot of different materials like silk and cotton and wool and metallics. For the beginning, we use cotton floss. Silk is much harder to work with, so you don't want to use silk floss as a beginner. It's very beautiful and nice to work with once you get the hang of it, but we'll start with cotton. We have a bunch of flosses on our website, or you can go to Michael's or wherever and get some cotton floss. It comes either in a skein like this, or we also sell it in hanks like this. It doesn't really matter. This is a hand-dyed cotton floss that we sell, and then this is just a not hand-dyed but lovely floss. If you buy the skein, you need to get it out of the skein and wind it onto something. You can get these little cards that are made, they're very inexpensive. You can find them on Etsy or wherever, that are made exactly for embroidery floss. And then you can even get a plastic box that they line up and fit in little sections. But if you don't wind it up onto something, then you're just going to have this loose skein, and it's going to get really knotted very quickly. When you take these little paper wrappers off your floss to begin with, save the one that has both the brand name and the color number, because you'll want to keep that. If you really love that color and want to get it again, you need to know what it was, because there's like, there could be 25 different shades of gray, for example. What I do is I will write the brand of the yarn, of the floss that I'm using, and I'll put the number right on this little card. And then as an extra safety, I save that paper wrapper and tuck it in. And I put the number and the brand on both sides. Just because I'm a little anal, I like to do it that way. Anyway, there's your floss in skein, in hank, and then wound up. Now, when you go to use some of the floss, I tend to use it at probably about 18 inches. What I do is I will unwind it, and I will pinch it down here and pull it up to about either my elbow or just a little bit farther up, and then cut it. And that will be the length that I work with. Because you don't want it to be so long that it keeps knotting up, but you don't have to have a million restarts of floss either. So, take enough off. Now, I guess I'll just use this. The other thing about floss is it comes in, there are many strands, usually 6. Once in a while you'll find some that are 2 or 3 strands wound into this thicker strand, but 6 is normal. You can embroider with 6 flosses. You can embroider, with 6 strands of the floss. You can embroider with 1. Our samplers usually call for 2, and 2 is a really nice number to use, or 3. I'm going to show you how to get the strand easily out of the 6-strand piece that we've cut. I like to tap the cut end so that the little floss ends all separate. Pull them out if you can, one at a time. Just pull one a little out. Pinch it between your thumb and your forefinger and just lightly grasp part of that length in between the rest of your fingers, and pull just one out. Just like that. Okay, then straighten this out again so it doesn't knot, and pull a second one out. Okay, and then set this aside. The reason for pulling them out one by one is partly so they don't knot as easily, and also because then when you put them back together to get 2 strands to work with, they tend to fluff up a tiny bit. They look prettier if they're just out of the cut strand and you've just pulled like two out together. They're still kind of smashed together like they were, and it just looks nicer this way. So that's what I do, and then put your ends together like that, okay? Then you need to thread your needle. So I'm going to tell you a little about needles before we thread it. Embroidery needles, in fact all needles, come in a lot of different sizes. Embroidery needles are specific in shape. They are pretty much straight in circumference from the eye down to just to before the point. The reason for that is you don't want a big bulbous eye up here, which makes it really easy to thread, but it leaves a big hole in your fabric. And your stitches can pull right through, especially if you're doing a French knot or a lot of stitches that are really close to each other. It'll pull right through. Also, a big eye leaves a hole. It does leave a hole in your fabric, that's what I just said, but it's also a very visible hole. And if you have to unpick for some reason, or even if you don't unpick, your floss may not completely cover that hole. You don't want an embroidery that has a bunch of needle holes in it that are visible. So use the smallest size needle. That doesn't mean length, it's the circumference for the number of flosses that you're using. If you were using all 6 strands of that floss, you'd need a bigger needle that has a bigger eye, otherwise you could never get it threaded. But I tend to use size 7. It's the size that I provide when I'm making kits, and it holds 2 or 3 strands of floss really nicely. So the needles usually come in a package of assorted sizes. So there will be a 7 in there. And then if you need to switch because you're going to work with 6 strands for some reason, then you can pull a different needle out. You can also buy them. You just have to do a little searching on Etsy or somewhere and buy a package, all of one size. Okay, now the one other thing I want to tell you is that you're going to want a pair of scissors that are very sharp, and you keep them just for your embroidery. Keep them in your little embroidery kit, your box or your case or whatever. So you never ever cut paper with these or anything other than floss. That way they'll stay really nice and sharp. Okay. And plus they're little. A lot of them are little and they're just fun. Now when you are going to thread, the one thing a lot of people will tell you not to do is to wet the end of with saliva, wet the end of your floss. I always do. I always wet mine. And the reason you're not supposed to wet it is theoretically it rusts the eye out. I've just done this my whole life and I can't help myself, so I continue to do it. If you're just starting, maybe you can try to avoid doing that. But see, they come apart. But if you lick your finger, and then they're right back together again. If you need to, if there are little hairs coming out, little hairs of thread, because these are nice and sharp because you don't use it for anything else, you can snip the tip of your thread, so that makes it really much easier to thread the needle. Now, embroidery needles, because they're machine made, they have 2 different sides, which you can't really see with your eye, I don't think, but there's 2 different sides. So when you go to thread a needle, if you're having a lot of trouble getting the thread through the eye, turn the needle and just see if that doesn't help. It should always help. You might hit the right side to begin with, but if you don't have it, turn it around. I always have a little trouble because I don't have my reading glasses on, but anyway, you get the thread through the eye, and there you go. Now, the one other thing I really want to show you is the kind of knot to use. It's called a milliner's knot. Milliner, like sewer. Trim this end here so that they're even. To make a milliner's knot, this is like one of the most useful things I'm going to show you, so really pay attention. Take the end of the thread and put it up and lay it alongside the needle so that the cut part of the thread is at the eye, and then just pinch that. Then take the rest of the thread and wrap 3 times around your needle. 1, 2, 3. Then with your thumb and your forefinger of your other hand, pinch those wraps. Let go with this hand, pinch, and then just carefully pull the needle out. So you're pulling it through the wrap. Just pull it all the way down. And you've got a beautiful knot right here. I don't know whether you can see it in the camera, but it's just the right size, not too big, not too small. If you don't like all these long ends, you can trim them a little bit, but that's how you make a milliner's knot. All right? And then you'll start stitching. And I just want to show you how to finish your, when you finish with this color and you need to start with a new thread, I'm just going to do a little tiny running stitch here so I can show you how to finish off. There are a lot of different ways. You can look online if you want to find other ways, but the way that I do it is I've just run a few stitches through here, and then the thread's coming out now on the back side. So let's just say I've done a lot of some shape with this thread and I want to finish this off. You just go back to the stitch that you can see underneath here, the first stitch next to where the thread's coming out, and just go through once, and then go through just through the thread, not through the fabric. One more time, and then take your needle and go through the loop. Don't pull it tight. Just through the loop like that. And there you have a little finished knot. And then you can cut it off. And that's that. So you learned a milliner's knot, which is the knot you use to start with. And then, I don't know, I just call that a finishing knot. I don't know what else they call it. But unfortunately, I started with my milliner's knot on the outside. That's not what you wanted to do, but that's all right. I'm just showing you how to make the knots. So that would theoretically have been, oh gosh, on the other side. I'm gonna go through that milliner's knot one more time for you, and then I'll embroider it correctly. All right, cut end. Very end of your floss. Lay it against the eye of the needle up here. Pinch it, the needle and the floss. Wrap 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Then with this hand, pinch the wrap and the needle and gently pull that needle through the wrap. Okay? There's your milliner's knot. Then come up from the bottom, the underside of the fabric, and make your stitches. Okay. And then when you finish that shape, turn it over, go through the last stitch once, go through the last stitch one more time, but don't pull it tight, leave a little loop, take the needle through the loop, and pull, and you've got a little knot there. And that's it. And then the rest of it is all just stitching to your heart's content with whatever stitches you want to use. And a lot of times we will keep the hoops, we'll use them as a little frame, although you can turn your embroidered work into a patch part for a quilt. You could turn it into a pillow, you could turn it into a pincushion, you could turn it into a sachet bag. Whatever you want to do with your embroidery is a whole other matter, but the hoops are pretty, and a lot of times like this, we just hang them like this, just in there. I will just stitch, you know, pull this tight with a little gathering stitch, and so it stays hidden, and there you go. Thanks for watching, guys, and have fun with all of your embroidery, and I hope to see you sometime. Bye-bye.